We got one final session for the day. It's been, man, this has gone fast, which is great. Great jam-packed information, and now we're pleased to have our partners in crime, Jake, which I think is he in? Did he come in hot?
I'm here, but I'm apparently not allowed to start my video. I'm not trusted to be safe for work on screen.
Trust no one.
That's it.
So, all right. Well, we'll see if we can get that resolved. But we do have our esteemed colleague and friend Jorge Orchilles as well. Unfortunately, Meryl Vernon was supposed to be on this panel all the way up until this morning. She was planning to be able to attend and join us on the Purple Teaming panel. Unfortunately, she's ran into some travel troubles. I can only presume it's somewhat related to what's going on in the Southeast right now. So, but hopefully she's safe and able to get where she needs to be. Unfortunately, cannot be joining us today. So you'll have to survive with me and Jake and George. But super excited to be chatting. This last session is a panel. We're going to talk about all things purple teaming. So that's kind of been the lead up to the final session. Is like we heard some awesome talks on the red team side, some awesome talks on the blue team side. I think what everybody has gained is that everybody's craft is not easy, right? It takes skill and it takes time and it takes experience. And there's a lot to know, right? And so we'll talk about kind of like, how does purple teaming fit in all of this, right? And so you'll notice that for the final outfit of the day, I have joined the purple teaming. Is this a platypus? What is this, Deb or Jason? I forget. But anyway, Nick's got one. What is it?
It's a platypus riding a pterodactyl.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So this is awesome. And then someone's asking, do we get that sweet Plex Track skateboard too? I don't know if we're giving those away for anything coming up, but if you join our engineering team, you get one. so awesome. Well, as Jake kind of gets online, I mean, we can tell that he's here in audio and George. So I guess I guess I shouldn't presume. Why don't we have everybody introduce themselves? Because we obviously know who George and Jake are, and I'm not presuming anybody knows who I am, so I'll go last. But George, why don't you take it off?
Sounds good. Happy to be here. Hello, everyone online, and thank you to the folks at Wild West Hackfest for hosting us yet again. I don't know why they keep bringing us back. Apparently, we don't suck that bad. My name is Jorge Orchilles. I am the Chief Technology Officer at Scythe. We are an adversary emulation platform that can automate lots of TTPs. And prior to that, I ran the offensive team at Citigroup for 10 years. And I'm also a SANS author, instructor, and Purple Team ambassador. I've been doing that for too long, 13 years, 14 years. Happy to be here.
Awesome. That's fantastic to have you. All right, Jake, you still on audio with us here?
I am on audio at least. And by the way, joke's on you. I'm actually not wearing any shirt at all. I did wear khakis, right? To keep the little Jake from State Farm.
Nice.
Yeah. So they apparently knew and just made sure to disable my video. So I actually work with George over at Scythe. I've been over there, since April. Now I'm the executive director of Cyber Threat Intel. And I actually help to build a lot of really cool adversary emulations to speed up your purple teaming, right? Because I think we are going to talk a little about like how to suck at purple teaming and not doing good adversary emulation is one of those, right? No,
that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. There we go.
That's good stuff. And thanks. And I mean, I didn't really introduce myself deeply at the beginning, but I've been your MC for the day. I'm Dan DeCloss, founder and CEO of Plex Track, former pen tester, former blue teamer, wore a lot of hats in my career, and started Plex Track to help ease the pain. And so love talking about purple teaming, love working with George and Jake and the team at Scythe and obviously the team with Wild West Hackin Fest and Black Hills. So we've got a little bit of time to just kind of talk through and digest what we heard this morning, or I guess this afternoon, and then talk about like what does it mean? Yeah, what does it mean to suck at purple teaming, and then what does it mean to have effective purple teaming, right? And then, I think one thing that we heard throughout these last several talks is like, context is king, right? And how do we empower both the red teams and the blue teams, whether those are external red teams or internal red teams? How do we empower the context sharing and creation, and bring that into simulation, emulation, and purple team exercises? So those are some of the themes that we'll want to kind of address today. So, but I'd like to hear kind of like from your guys' mouths, what do you think the ultimate goals are from purple teaming?
Yeah, so purple teaming and there
he is.
He is wearing a shirt. My God.
All right.
Awesome. So purple teaming, of course, the name came from our very creative ways of red plus blue, working together. Back in the day, it was very adversarial, pun intended, of red versus blue. And then we figured if they collaborated and did things together, we'd call it purple teaming because we're super creative. And then, of course, others have gotten this purple teaming term, just like they've gotten all the other terms, and they just want one of those. And then marketing kind of takes over and makes things not great. Sorry, any marketing folks on there. But, but yeah, I think it's important to know, right? It's not like, oh, the red team did this thing and then like sent a report over to blue team and now the blue team's involved. Like that's not purple, right? Like that's still very much red versus blue. I think the key word there that we need is collaboration, right? The teams working together. And yeah, we did start purple teaming when it was, red teams doing and how David talked about it, right? Of going objective based and things like that. And then, actually realized that if we work together, we were more efficient at fixing or improving things than when we were just throwing a report over the fence and showing maybe a reveal or something like that. So I think the collaboration is the important term here of what purple teaming is today.
That is 100% it. It drives me mad. And I mean like Hulk smash kind of mad when somebody gets in and they're like, yeah, we did a purple team because red came in and they did this red team and then blue got the report. And I'm like, guys, that's like pretending that coloring with some red and then coloring with some blue with your Crayola crayon somehow made a purple crayon. It didn't, right? Your purple looks like butt, right, on your coloring sheet there. By the way, Black Hills has some of the best coloring sheets out there, period. Between, what is it, like the fancy bear with the flamethrower and some of the... But I mean, I love the Crayola analogy because nobody confuses you mixing red and blue on the paper for an actual purple crayon, right? And it's only that collaboration, right? And it's real-time collaboration, by the way, right? That really facilitates that. One other thing that I'm going to throw out there is for you to do really solid purple teaming, there has to be a feedback loop, right? And of course, this is a piece of the collaboration, right? Red is executing a step. They're executing a procedure. Let's be clear on this, right? They're executing a procedure. Blue is then looking to say, can we see this? Did we block it? Would we alert on it? They're tuning telemetry. And then you're repeating. And if you don't get that repeatability inside of that feedback loop, I'll just throw out there that there's a bit of an issue in really operationalizing purple teaming there.
I love it because, like, it in some respects, we're breaking down walls and we're breaking down barriers, right? Because it's like, I think a lot of red teamers, and especially, even when I was, you wanted to hold your techniques close to the chest because, like, hey, these work, these are awesome, I want to keep doing them, right? But at the end of the day, what is the ultimate mission? The ultimate mission is that we're helping people be able to identify what are these techniques, how does an attacker actually work in their environment, and what do we have to do to make sure that we can stop it from happening, hopefully before the bad guys get there, right? And now we all know it's like an if, not a when, but win, not an if, but being able to truly educate and inform both sides of the fence, right? Because, like, I think, one thing that is clear, if you're a pure red teamer and you haven't really been exposed to much of the blue team activities, and you're in for a treat to recognize how hard that job is I kind of highlighted Noah's talk. He's got hackers, red teamers, vendors, just nefarious users, or users just not really realizing that they're doing things to bypass security. There's all these things that they have to focus on, right? And the red teamers, are definitely ingrained in like, what are the cool new techniques that I can utilize? So collaboration, I mean, it's like such important because it gives you the visibility too, right? I mean, Caitlin talked about, a critical piece is visibility. And so I think from a goals perspective, my mantra is like, hey, you're here to be able to collaborate so that you can move the ball forward on security posture for an organization, right? Yep. Getting better at security is ultimately the biggest goal, right?
I got a big question here, right? Because I do agree with you on the whole, back in the day, right? We were red teaming. I think most folks know I used to sit on the other side of the keyboard. Some Russian little folk made that very public a few years back. But, obviously there's a desire to be secret about your tools and your techniques as a red teamer. Dan, I know there's a lot of folks out here that are red team focused, right? How do you break that mentality to, I am going to give my techniques, right, to blue so that they can, engineer detections around them? I mean, how do you help break that mentality?
I mean, you keep preaching it, right? It's like you over communicate the need, right? I mean, I think in some respects, it's really like helping recognize that, like, by holding on to this stuff, you're not really helping at the end of the day, right? I mean, in some respects, it's being selfish, right? But I think we all kind of understand how dangerous stockpiling vulnerabilities can be. I don't want to get like too political, but it's like, I mean, like, it's important that, like, what is the true mission that we're on, right? And if you're truly like, a white hat type of hacker, or somebody that's really in it for the mission of making the world a safer place, that's really what it's all about. You can always, I mean, your craft and as a red teamer is to continue to find the ways and understand the ways that people are, how to continue to bypass more and more of the protections, right? So, George, do you have a thought?
Yeah, the collaboration, right? It's easier said than done, especially in those shops that have had that very adversarial relationship for so many years. I mean, that's how I lived it, being on building a red team. We were super cool. We got approval to do this. You got approval to hack all the things, no scope for 3 months, this objective, right? And then we did it, and it was like, yeah, we won. We're awesome. We own the entire company. Yeah. And then, like, you go to a readout meeting, and right, like, there's another human on the other side, like, they're calling their baby ugly. You're telling them that they didn't catch anything, that they suck, and we did that many times. So, like, that just kept making it harder and harder to actually come and sit together and collaborate. It wasn't until we actually physically went to a conference together and, like, had, 3 days with each other involving, talking shop, but also not talking shop, right? Having dinner, meeting each other, realizing, wow, we all work at the same company and we all have the same goal. And now I'm understanding some of your frustrations, and now you understand mine. And oh my gosh, maybe we can get along. Like, why don't we do one of these together next time? And then that kind of, takes a while to get there, but it's definitely easier said than done. And we don't really talk much about, like, the psychology behind all of that, right? We talk more about, like, hey, let's get everyone together in a room and this and that. More of, like, operationalizing it than to focus, right? And now, not everyone's like that, right? Other companies, we have some customers that they have a 10-person security team, like, no one's red, no one's blue, like, they're all doing everything together. And those, are obviously easier to come and help them implement purple team exercises on. But yeah.
Well, and I think, early on, I kind of had this realization where I was talking to some folks that are here local. I live in the Boise area, right? And so I was talking to some folks, and this was probably 8 or 9 years ago now, but, like, they've never done a pen test, right? And they are they're pretty, in my opinion, they were a pretty mature organization from a security perspective. And they're like, well, yeah, we're nervous. We get this caught, or they had all these anxieties around getting a pen test. And to me, I was like, man, like that's the whole point, is that like you want to be able to identify your gaps, and so it's like, I realize like there's this clear like barrier where it's like people are scared like to get called out, so to speak, as opposed to no, I mean, like we're all in this together, right? Like we're all there's gonna be ways to get around your defenses, and so becoming more efficient at it. I always like to talk about putting it into a programmatic effect, right? And it's not these kind of one and done kind of things. And there is a comment, I think, somewhere in here. I'm trying to track Discord and Q&A, but like, around like the collaboration may happen better between internal teams. But I posit that external red teams, like consulting firms, should also be very emphatic on the collaboration and what are the goals and how do we work together? Because that's I mean, in my opinion, how it's going to be the most effective.
Yeah, if I may here, I've actually observed, kind of the opposite of, I think, what the questioner or question asker kind of mentioned here, where it's about like internal teams collaborate better than external. And obviously I have a large consulting background, but I've actually experienced quite the opposite, right? Where a lot of internal teams, because they have maligned KPIs, which I'll jump back to in just a second, they often are not willing to share, and there's not really a driver for it, right? If you bring in a consultant team, right, a consulting red team, and say, hey, part of the goal of yours is to do a great purple team exercise, and they don't share, they're not coming back, right? And so there's a built-in incentive, right, for them to. Now, look, if I've got a custom implant framework that I've put, let's say $50,000 or $100,000 worth of dev time in, and you booked a 3-day purple team engagement, yeah, we're not exposing this crazy custom implant framework, for your guys and gals to go in and pull apart, right? But we will go through, obviously, an exercise, using good cyber threat intelligence driven activities, right? Go in and do great adversary emulation at the procedure level. But I really do posit that the reason a lot of internal teams, and George kind of spoke to this, right? That a lot of internal teams don't collaborate as much is the whole "ha ha, we got you" kind of moment. And that's where a lot of, I've seen red teams, Dan, we actually, Dan and I worked together many moons ago. Before Dan started FlexTrack, actually, but and I remember a red team at a place we may have worked together had some, we'll call them maligned KPIs, like did you get domain admin? And it's like, whoa, red exists to make blue better, not to embarrass blue.
Right.
And so, yeah, anyway.
Yep.
Good old days, right? So,
no, so true. Well, and I think that's an interesting point too, right? Because what does good collaboration look like? I think is another important thing, and that comes back to your KPIs and as Noah highlighted as well, and Caitlin kind of brought to the forefront. If a red team can actually provide, understands the context of what their engagement should be identifying, that's going to make it so much more impactful to the blue team, right, and to the defenses. So regardless of whether this is an external consulting team or an internal team, they have to understand that context. And that, I mean, what would be your recommendation to groups that are trying to kind of get purple teaming going? Like, how do you help build that collaboration to understand more of the context, both from the internal and the external side?
George, do you want to start this, or?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we put out there for free, and I actually just posted it, more in relation to red team burning their tools, because we do cover that in the frequently asked questions. But it's a purple team exercise framework. It's version 2 that's out there. It's totally free. You can pick it up and read through it and hopefully use it. And it outlines how to do it the way that mostly everyone on the industry does a real purple team exercise, by working together, not talking about the psychology and the non-operational part, right, which we already hit on. But yeah, it's goal-based. Like what is the goal of your purple team exercise? Is it to foster that collaborative culture? Because if that's the case, then like you need to decide that early so that you'll aim the exercise at that. Is it, you're baking off 2 EDRs in a lab environment to see which one might be better for your organization? Then that's a different goal. The planning is going to be different. Is it because there was a red team engagement already done and it's been 6 months and we don't think we fixed anything? I don't think we're any better. Let's do a purple team to try to improve. And then is it to train your people, right? So, of course, depending on all those goals and objectives, you will have a different planning phase, and essentially the entire rest of the exercise will be different. And that's why purple team exercises are taking off, because you will probably have all these goals, right? People are going to say all of the above, but one exercise is not going to meet all of the above. So you'll do these more and more, and then kind of operationalize it. And one thing I want to say about Caitlin's presentation, right? It was internal, right? If you did form something like a purple team internally where you're working together, right? Caitlin, coming from the blue team side, has these ideas of these canaries and honey tokens and all that. And this happened in our organization. We had our purple team. We started looking at some of this deception technology, and we worked together because the blue team had ideas of where to put these traps, whereas the red team would say, well, wait a minute, this is where I would go for. This is what I would look for. This is where I get caught. If you do it there, I'm probably going to notice it's deception because, I'd run this command, etc. So yeah, operationalizing all of that. I know the question was how to get started, but want to throw that one in there.
You got excited. That's good.
So I have 4 words here really that drive this home for me. It's start small, start simple, right? If your first purple team exercise, if there's even a discussion of red team giving up tools, you've done it wrong. I hate to be like categorical here, and be like, nah, man, like you just did it wrong, but that's it, right? If your first exercise you're talking about giving up tools, you're just doing it wrong. Go out to look at the LOLBOS inventory or the GTFO bins, right? Or the WTF bins, right? So basically living off the land binaries. This is where threat actors are going anyway, by the way, right? If you don't have nation state, development budgets for red team tooling, right? Or you only know the one EDR you're going up against because it's the one internally, then you start with living off the land binaries. Grab a couple of those. And by the way, when I talk to blue teams, right, doing purple team exercises, they're like, oh, no, we've got that. No problem, right? Oh, really? Okay, cool. So when I ran MS build, you caught that. When I renamed it to Jake.exe, you didn't, right? So we want to clarify that you really don't have the lol bin problem solved, right, as it were. And so start with a couple of those. That's one, gives the red team, because again, red team, if you're remotely competent, right, outside of your tool set, in which case, if you're only confident in your tool set, you're fishing with dynamite. Let's be clear here, right? But again, it's going to give the red team a couple of chances to win, as it were, or drive value. And separately, starting out, right, if blue's not catching MS build or something like that, right, like, oh my gosh, that's a great, great finding. And so I love to start with a few of those. It's scoped to a couple of hours, couple of commands, and done. Right?
I love it. Yeah, I love it because, I think you highlighted on so many things that I was kind of making some notes of, how long should these be? How often should these be? And truly, that's between you. I mean, that's internally, but our advice, I would think, as a panel is do this frequently and do it, scope these small. The big red team exercises that, you're going to hire someone like David to come in and do these. Those can be broad, right? Those may take some time, and you can have a whole team that's, red team that you've hired to go broad, right? But with a purple team, you can make it programmatic, and you can go very deep on certain techniques and tactics, right? And you just make so much more progress. I mean, I think, you mentioned, the purple team framework, and we did some research, last year where, we asked people that were doing purple teaming, did they feel like they made more progress? And undoubtedly they could point back to the fact that purple teaming in a concise and consistent method, truly helped them feel like they were making progress, right? And they could demonstrate it, right? And I think that's really
demonstrable with the KPIs, man, because you've got detection engineering that's built. But for doing the purple team, we wouldn't have these detections. It's
exactly. Yeah. Now, I'm sure one question that probably will come up, but hasn't, is, okay, so what if I don't have an internal red team, or what role? How do you kind of get going there?
I mean, self-servingly, you could buy an automation framework that, helps you with purple teaming and adversary emulation, right? That would be an example, right? Yep. Another one, look, again, I'll drop some links here in Discord when I shut up, but otherwise, right off the bat, go out to Amazon, buy the Hacker's Playbook, right? The Hacker's Playbook is fantastic, right? So that's where I would go for that. Buy all 3 editions of it, read them, love it, and just go through and start exercising some of that. Because again, that's like, you must be this tall to ride the internet kind of stuff. And if you're not there, validate that you're there, right? So, George.
Yeah, one of the things I put out there was Red Canary's 2022 threat report. Mm-hmm. And they went through what they saw in all their customers, what the most likely things they saw, and published them. So I went through them and essentially built just step by step, like literally these are copy and paste into either a command prompt or a PowerShell on your system and see if you have any detections for them. Right? It's like the basic way to start. Of course, you need, like Jake said, you need some visibility, you need some log sources. But yeah, that's definitely one of the ways to begin if you haven't done this at all ever, right? And that technically leverages some CTI. We had a great question here. I'm sure you're going to ask it next, Dan, from Joel on Discord. But yeah, it leverages a little bit of CTI, not so specific for your organization, but at least like this is what they've seen in the real world, and this is where we can get started. It's like 10 TTPs. You could probably knock those out in a half-day session and just get going, right? Start simple, like Nick said.
Yeah, I think I actually think Nick, who's on the call, I actually asked him at one point, "Hey, can we make a run book?" Because Plexfrig has a run book module. Like, can we make a run book from the threat detection report from Red Canary? So I think we have that as on our GitHub. But it's like, just because you don't have a background in red teaming or pen testing doesn't mean that you can't get started. And I think that there's some great resources through these. MITRE obviously is the MITRE attack matrix is great. Red Canary has not only the threat detection report, but the atomic red team, where it actually it talks through here's the commands that these attackers ran in these scenarios, right? So it's like, at least you have a capability to test the known knowns, right? Before you have to get all worried about things that you don't know how to execute or wouldn't be able to detect. Which leads, and I actually, Joel, great question, because this was one of my questions was, what role should threat intelligence play from a purple teaming perspective? Because Jake, you have a deep background in threat intel, and I think threat intelligence often gets consumed largely in the response and IR perspective, IOCs, and getting into that detection. But what role should it or does it play in purple teaming?
I love that you mentioned my 3 least favorite letters in the alphabet, I, O, and C, respectively. Look, way too many people confuse IOCs for threat intelligence, right? And so I take, I also work in faculty over the Institute for Applied Network Security, and I take probably, a call every other month at least, where somebody's like, how do I mature my CTI program? And we discuss and get in, like, what are you doing today? They're like, well, we ingest a bunch of IOCs and we put them on the firewall, and then I'm like, and then what? And then then we wait for hits. And I'm like, so basically your job is something I could automate away with SOAR, right? Like, let's talk about how not to be that person, right? And so, CTI, really from our purple teaming standpoint, it's all about adversary emulation, right? Now, I'll back up for 1 second here and mention that you may also do threat emulation, which is like the everything in the kitchen sink, right? Whatever technique you want to bring it, right? And these are, typically the Watch the Black Hat, the Wild West Hackin Fest, that, these conferences where people are dropping different techniques or talking about new ways to maybe execute a given technique. But look, generally, we are not looking to protect against everything, right? We're looking to do a purple team where we are validating controls against a specific adversary. So we're engaging in adversary emulation, not threat emulation. And so, this kind of makes sense, right? If you can't do one adversary, you can't do all of them simultaneously, where you get to grab bag that, like fantasy football, where there's no draft, right? You obviously can't defend against that, right? So I was going to make a football joke, but I haven't been paying enough attention to the season yet. But I mean, seriously, that's it, right? CTI is going to drive the actions your purple team takes. As a matter of fact, even coming back to the wool bin stuff, right? A lot of the adversary simulation plans that I build at Scythe, and as a matter of fact, just built one yesterday. That's sitting in the queue, and it actually is using a interesting wool bin technique, pitching off a run DLL 32, right, for a unique way to gain execution, right? And you're like, man, that's and I saw it on a reported future report on a threat actor group, right? And that's where consuming that threat intel and then combining that with some of their IOCs, command and control servers, domains, file name paths, registry paths. That stuff is going to allow you to go and validate your controls. And by the way, if your blue team looks, they don't see it. And when they do, if they don't mistake you for that threat actor group, right? If their research doesn't go and look, hey, you're TA 413 kind of thing, right? Then I'd surmise you probably aren't doing your job well on the CTI side. So
great, that's fantastic. George, did you have any other commentary there? Or?
No, other than leverage CTI because you want to emulate the threats that are most likely going to affect you, and not some random. And that comes back to the value, right?
Yeah.
Like if you are leveraging CTI, which we did put that in the purple team exercise framework, then you are doing something high value already, So that's the only thing I would add there.
Yeah.
Can I pivot back around on this for 1 second too? Yeah. Just to dispel a common objection that I hear for purple teaming off of and doing adverse simulation off of published CTI reports. Because I've had executives and I've had stakeholders, even some red teamers come back like, Jake, those techniques, those procedures, they've been published. And so the threat actors definitely moved on from those. So there's no value here, right? I'm like, well, first off, having been a threat actor myself, right? I can tell you they have budgets just like you do. They have operational constraints just like you do. And just because something got published doesn't mean they file 13-bit, right? But separately and critically, if you can't detect the stuff that we know about today, how the heck are you going to detect the as yet unknown stuff, right? So this is an obvious place to start. Do not be dispelled by it's been published, therefore it's been burned, and therefore it'll never be used again. That's ridiculous thinking.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think, and I've also been in situations where it's like, hey, let's say like, hey, the Uber attack, right? And it's like, and a stakeholder is going to come to you and say, hey, or even like something like Log4j, right? It's like, hey, are we protected against that, right? And it's like, how quickly can you go and at least test some of these techniques that happen, right? Like MFA fatigue, like are we vulnerable to that, or some of these SSO chain vulnerabilities? Being able to like quickly and rapidly like put together a test plan and just say, hey, we're just gonna validate, like, is there anything in that specific chain of attacks that that we would be susceptible to, and can we report up the ladder? Because I think it's no doubt, and it's no secret that cyber is getting a more prominent voice in the boardroom, right? I mean, people at the board level are asking cyber related questions, and so the more you can quickly identify and report on, yes, we saw this come out, we immediately put a test plan together and tested it. Here's where our gaps are, and here's what we're doing to fix it, right? That's money, right? I mean, that's gold. It's not, at least the more, data is power. And I think also coming at it from an adversary emulation perspective, or it's like, hey, we're gonna test these specific things or these specific categories of tests. It does discipline the red team a little bit, right? It keeps them from being able to just like, hey, I can boil the ocean here, as opposed to, nope, my context is this, right? I need to make sure we're providing the value within these guardrails, and I think that it sharpens the red team's, capabilities as well. Cause like, yeah, it might be a burned technique, but maybe they can find a different way to, to get around it. Right. So. So threat intelligence, I'm a big fan. I think actually, I'm shameless plug. My talk at Wild West Hackin Fest coming up in a couple of weeks is, a case for threat informed pen testing. So, so I guess you probably already heard it. No, I think it's good. We've heard some things in the talk today. Where and when do automation make a difference, and where does it actually start to become a crutch or trip you up?
George, you starting that, or am I?
You go for it. I have to think about it more. You think faster than me.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, hey, yeah. So look, automation is a good thing, right? In the sense that it allows repeatability. I want to come back to this where, as far as like where it's a really positive thing, it's forced repeatability. Red teamers intuitively are problem solvers, right? In fact, if you are not a problem solver, if you do not like open-ended problems to which there may not actually be an answer, red teaming is the wrong business for you, right? It leads to lots of frustration, that kind of piece. And the big problem there, though, is that these problem solvers, that they get hooked on solving problems. And so when I engineer a protection, right, or a prevention method, they sometimes try to zig around it in the retest. And so automation benefits me dramatically in that there's no zig or zag, right? That's also the downfall, is there's no zig or zag, right? And so, the automation piece is fantastic for repeating an emulation and not driving your red teamer absolutely bonkers, right? Because they don't want to do the same thing over and over again. And honestly, they shouldn't. That's why automation exists. But then I want the red teamer or somebody with that kind of background to make sure that I didn't engineer, a detection for one variation of a thing, that we're started once we can detect variation number one, whatever we call it, like the prime use case, right? Then can we look at other variations, right? So that we're not overfitting our detections.
Yeah, and that's like where we get to see people that do the whole minor attack checkbox, right? Bingo card. Or it's like, we caught this one run DLL 32 example, right? If it uses this particular entry point, we're good. Green. And then, that's where the red teamer needs to come and be like, well, I just changed the entry point to number 4. Let me try that. Oh, see? You didn't catch me now, right? Yeah. And that's where we've been doing a whole lot of work on that. I'm sure you've heard Chris Peacock has a talk on it on the TTP pyramid, right? Because tactics, techniques, and procedures are indeed 3 different words with 3 different meanings. And that's what Jake is saying right now, right? Is that, you automate and you're like, look, we got this. And then you run it all the time just to have your control validation and your green checkbox. And it's not the case, right? A red teamer will come, figure it out and change it trivially. And then your green checkbox is now just a false sense of security.
Yeah, I like to view it as it doesn't check your brain at the door, right? It's like, okay, I've got this, because you can just rely on like, I ran that script and for both blue and red, right? I mean, like, hey, we've got this whole automation, whereas if we have a malware sample or a projected malware sample, it automatically uploads it to VirusTotal or whatever the techniques are these days. I haven't been in as blue as recent, but all those things, and you rely on the output of that, as opposed to recognizing that automation is meant to remove friction in your process, right, and your workflow, and that you still have to use your brain to analyze and question and adjust and adapt, and then you can tweak your automation from there. So I think it's just really, I think it's an important distinction of it's not meant to just provide all the answers, and getting just a check. Like you said, a box checked, but actually eliminating the friction in your workflow and your process to really help stay focused on the more intricate things that really do require manual thought and effort, right? Analysis, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So I wanted to come back to, we talked a lot about how to get started in purple teaming and how it looks good, and I was like, what Jake, what do you think is what is a sucky purple team? Or I forget how you phrased it, but what does it mean to suck at purple teaming?
I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to suck at purple teaming. The one that I see most often is what we just started out with, which is the red ran a set of emulations or what have you, and then handed off the report to blue, right? Where red did a test, hands off the report to blue. That's just not purple teaming, right? And the if we're not working to break down the friction between red and blue, I think generally those are going to be really sucky, really sucky tests. Another big one that I see is the desire for red to come in and use a bunch of esoteric cases, right? This is like going into preschool, and trying to teach calculus. That's a bad plan. I'm not, by the way, knocking blue, saying they're the preschoolers here, but if you don't know, right, we should be starting with the basics and scaffolding from there. And really, I often analogize it to load testing a bridge, right? If I were to take a bridge and I were to say, well, I want to know that this thing can withstand the adversary, right? So pick the adversary, and of course, in this analogy, that's weight. If I go in and I say, look, man, tell me what I'm going to do here. I'm going to drop 1,000-pound weight on that thing and see if it crashes, right? If the bridge crashes, we know it doesn't withstand 1,000-pound weight, but we know nothing else. We don't know if it can withstand 995 pounds, but not 1,000, or whether it's 3 pounds. And there is a world of difference between those two. And so what I always advise folks to do to not suck at by the way, the how to suck at purple teaming here in this analogy is to go in and start dropping 1,000-pound weights on your bridge, or 10,000-pound weights, or whatever that is, trying to be like, look, fail. It's like, that's not interesting to me. I want to know where the line is at, right? And in fact, John Strand has talked about this before. He and I have actually been on panels very similar to this with the how to not suck at red teaming, right? And it's like, man, if you're going in, a lot of the times, one of our exit strategies here is to try to get caught on the way out, right? Once we've achieved our objectives, let's go ahead and ratchet up the noise. We know we're successful here. Let's ratchet up the noise to see, right, where is that cut line? Because otherwise, I'm delivering a report that says, well, you didn't catch us, right? Without any indication of like, well, but you could have caught this, and this, just not these other things we did, right? So build up is the long and the short of it.
Yeah, I think how to suck at purple teaming is, trying to think that it's just something you can buy or get, right? It involves people. It is a process, right? And of course, you can have technology that helps you, right? Flex track, site, etc., right? But it's a process. It's not like, I want one of those, And I think that's one of the problems. And, we're obviously all here working together trying to fix that problem of like, what is the actual definition of purple teaming? Can you just buy one and put it in your shelf? No. And this is actually how it works. These are the goals, etc. Of course, it's not easy, right? Like, there is no easy button, but I think most people in security have realized that, even though they still want to find that the non-existent easy button.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would, the only thought I have, in addition to what you all have said is I think it's not so much like how to suck at it, but also like how to do yourself a disservice with it is to not make it more consistent and periodic, right? Like being able, so we have a customer, I would say they're probably one of the world's you've probably been exposed to some of the world's foremost purple teams as well, but like one of our customers, they do it every Thursday, right? And they have a readout every Thursday, right? And I even asked them the question around how do they utilize threat intelligence, and they're like, and they just dropped some golden nuggets. So that's like a teaser for my talk, but like just the fact that like, hey, we're going to make it a part of our security program that every Thursday we're getting the blue team together, we're getting the red team together, and we're doing this as an exercise. And I also think that doesn't have to necessarily mean that we're all going to sit down at the same time and do it. Right. It's definitely, everybody's aware, like, here are the things that we're going to test. We're going to document like when we tested it and things like that. The blue team may have to, it doesn't have to be in real time, but as long as it's that collaborative notion, I think is important. So not necessarily to suck at it, but to do it really well, I think is to do it, on a repeated basis and really discipline the programmatic approach.
Yeah, can we maybe highlight here that the line between sucking and not sucking at a purple team is really narrow, right? There is not a lot of room here. Like, from a binary perspective, this is one of these things that you either do really well or generally fail at. Has been my experience, right? And so if you're looking for how to suck at a purple team, it's do the opposite of what we're talking about. And if you're looking to not suck, just do what we're talking about. And I think that's probably a good,
yeah, it's fair. That's very fair. Like, so I guess there's
add a little bit on the, right. We talked about how to get started, but then, operationalize it to the point where, something comes in, you review it as a team, right? You share it with everyone. You assign members of each team to look at this. You come together, you see if, maybe it is something you've already tested before. Maybe it's a new procedure of something you've already tested before. But yeah, that way you're not having to wait for, weekly ones are great. We have a couple customers doing weekly ones as well. But for organizations that are not, right, you can do it whenever something does come up, right? Because your senior management's going to be asking, are we affected by this, right? It's like, when Folina came out, right? It's like, it's a no day. Of course you're affected by it. You see the answer, right? The answer is like, yeah, we are, because by definition, a no day means we don't have a patch. But Jake actually did awesome work that weekend on being able to detect everything that was observed after that initial access and that initial exploit that you probably couldn't detect. And then there, by Tuesday morning, because it was a long weekend, as is very typical, you actually have an answer that your team worked together on, and you have actual data behind what you did, and not just no, I think we're good. We won't get caught, or we will,
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about it, and I think one more question, then we'll try to answer a few of these questions in the Q&A, and then I think we're already at time, which has flown by. But you talk about, so both teams, in their respective talks, the red team and the blue team, they talked about data and telemetry, right? And what would you say are some key points of telemetry in a purple team exercise outside of the actual techniques that are being ran, I guess, is maybe a jumping off point. I mean, George,
I keep referencing back the purple team execution framework because it's actually there as well, like the data sources that you need for what you're going to do. And especially nowadays, right? Like you do that beforehand. Like you already know what TTPs are going to run and the procedures. So you should already know, especially with the latest updates to attack, what are the data sources that you need. And yeah, you should definitely have those, or if not, like you should, it will allow you to set expectations correctly, right? Like all the TTPs are like making API calls, and you have no visibility of API calls, then you're probably not going to see anything, right? So yeah, definitely the data sources and knowing what you're doing. And that's why, planning and prep is a very important part of having a successful purple team. You don't want to figure that out when everyone's in the room together, right? Not doing their day-to-day because they're working together here, and then realize like, wow, everything the red team just did, we don't have visibility because we haven't implemented that tool. And, it's like, it's very low value.
Yeah. To George's point here, man, part of the process on the telemetry side, without getting into specific telemetry or signal, when you walk into the purple team exercise, there should be some level of understanding what are your data sources, right? If you're a blue team, you don't have a collection management framework today or CTI. Somebody in your org should be putting together a collection management framework so you know what telemetry you have, where you have it, and how long it's stored for, right? So what's my look back on this, right? A fourth dimension of that sometimes, and fifth maybe might be what questions can I answer with this, more for junior personnel. And then, possibly as well, any limitations around, that collection, right? But I'm big on having this. And then separately, as you roll into the purple team, red on the other side, beyond the telemetry, should really have communicated, if this isn't being CTI driven, where CTI is driving, like, what are we going to do with this purple team exercise? Red shouldn't be walking in there like, okay, let's play some challenge cards over here that blue has no idea if they're ready to attack, because again, if blue is going to tweak something ahead of, right, the purple team, that's a huge win, right? It's not one of those like and I've actually run some exercises like this where I've been a facilitator for exercises like this where red pops in and they're like, oh man, we've got some stuff that's definitely going to challenge them, and I'm like, well, what? And they're like, oh, we can't tell anyone yet. I'm like, dude, you're wasting everyone's money, right? Like time is money and you're wasting it, right? If you've given Blue the heads up, this is what we're going to do, right? It's not a matter of like you win first and they engineer a detection, right? If they've engineered a detection ahead of us running that and you're helping to validate that, that's still a huge win, right? Anyway, sorry.
No, it's so true. And I mean, I think that was the last thing that I was going to highlight is like, it's important to just, when you're in a purple team exercise, like being able to say like, hey, as the red team, this did succeed or this did fail. And the blue team can also correlate like, hey, we had logs or we had a detection, we had an alert, and we actually had a response, right? I mean, and collecting that over time is extremely valuable because you then start to see your trends of like, and I think it's important, like, hey, this time we ran it and we caught it. This time we ran it and we didn't catch it. So then you can actually start to kind of identify like, okay, what's going on that we're, making these adjustments. So, cause like, you're not always going to, I think it's natural. You're not always going to just see that slope of the curve of like detections go down. Like you're gonna have some times where it's like, hey, we missed something or a configuration got changed and now we don't detect it anymore. And I think that's key telemetry that's out, like that's related to the exercises themselves, right? As opposed to just the data sources for the actual techniques. And I think that's super important and things to be tracking. Okay, so we've got a few minutes. Does someone want to take the how would you define simulation versus emulation debate? Or I mean, I guess that's a real question. But this person is correct in that those are often used interchangeably. And what would be what would be the distinction, if any?
Go for
George,
it.
you taking this or am I?
No, you go.
Okay. So my my thought around emulation versus simulation. Emulation is doing the thing, right, that the threat actor did, right? I'm going to use a potentially controversial example here, and I'm going to use the idea with a gunshot, right? And so if I were to, for instance, emulate a gunshot, right, I would be, either actually firing a gun, right, in a what we hope would be a test dummy, and observing the impact. Or if it were in a production environment and that were unsafe, I would want to do things that everything but the damaging part, right? So I would make sure that we had created a muzzle flash and a very loud bang, right? And maybe impact elsewhere. And we might paint the target a little bit red as if they were bleeding. Simulation, on the other hand, would be something like paintball, right? So here we are getting the full effect of, simulating something minus the, and so that's the way I'd analogize it here. And so I'm going to make it real on the purple team side and say that, if I were to simulate ransomware, I might create a ransomware type of simulation where a ransomware type binary that does a lot of stuff like ransomware. It maybe creates some copies of files and scrambles the contents and renames those files and drops a readme.txt. Whereas if I were emulating, I might simply create a bunch of files with a given name, drop the readme.txt, right? That kind of stuff just to create the observables. Does that make sense from a differentiation? And by the way, George, do you disagree? Because that's another.
No, I mean, if you've ever played a video game emulator, right, you're actually playing the video game and the results can be different every time you do stuff on it, but you're actually playing it, right? Like it's actually happening. Whereas, an airplane simulator, you're getting on and, you want to relive the Hudson, crash landing. Yeah. It's going to do the same thing over and over, right?
Well, that was a way better answer, and we should have gone with you. So,
hey, but they were both great answers. Yeah, they were both great answers. And I will admit, it still gets fuzzy in my brain. It's like they're two very distinct things, but important. So, fantastic answer. All right, one more question, and this is more technical. So I'll let you guys definitely.
I'll make it the test scenario one for sure here, right?
Not
a test scenario, right?
Which one are we? The previous. Okay. I was thinking about this Windows Sysmon question thing, but maybe you guys can answer that. Someone can type that out, and we'll go to the should previous test scenarios not be automated to ensure continued detection, then move to new scenarios / exercises. So I think it's kind of a procedural thing, right? A question, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I wanted this, but now George, do you want to take this one first and I'll close it out? Or
100%, right? Like that is one of the reasons that I actually lost some red teamers in my previous employer because they were doing the same thing manually over and over before we had an actual automation framework. So back then it was, PowerShell Empire had just come out and we're using it. And then we had to re-show the same thing to the Windows endpoint engineers, then the server engineers, then the operations team, then the Splunk team, then the content building team. It was just like repeating the same thing over and over until we got some improvements. And actually, that's where I learned about Scythe and started using it there. So yes, I would definitely go for automating something that you've already done once and make sure that you don't get that environmental drift, right? Like you detected it today, your team knew what to do. Awesome. Next week, something happened. We don't know what. The weekend happened. And now that detection and everything you worked on is not triggering. And, you find out because you actually automated and tested it versus you got a phone call that you've been breached and, this is what they did.
regression testing. Like those words, I mean, anybody who does develop, any organization that does development knows the word. Even I know executives who can barely tell me like what operating system they're running on their computer that know the words regression testing because it's bitten them, right? It's bitten the organization. They've heard it as a root cause. Folks, as someone who's done a ton of incident response, I can tell you a lot of the root cause around incidents, it's failure to do regression testing and control validation. You tested it once, you said it was good, flew the mission accomplished banner. 3 months later, something changed. And it may have been something you did, which, by the way, is something I'll be talking on at Wild West Hackin Fest, is exclusions in your controls, and actually applying those intelligently. It's either something you did or something, maybe it's a product update and it's a bug, right? We've seen those. Take your pick, but yes, automate the heck out of regression testing.
Yep. I don't have anything to add. You guys answered it spot on. So, all right. Well, we're at time. I'll throw the last question that is just kind of I think a good recap of the session was purple teaming is the part of the Step Brothers movie. If you've seen the Step Brothers movie where they say, did we just become best friends? Between the red and the blue, I like it. So that's good stuff. Well, gentlemen, as always, it's a super honor to be able to be on a panel with you and just have these discussions. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know we're all busy, and then I also want to just I don't know if any of the other speakers are here, but if you are, Noah, David, Nick, Caitlin, feel free to come on, but thank you so much for your time. Everybody that joined us today, thank you so much. Thank you to the World Wild West Hacking Fest team as well. I will announce the winner of the giveaway from the PlexTrax gear, the gear giveaway. It was Mike M, and we do have the email address associated with Mike. So Mike, congratulations. You'll be getting an email and we'll be finding a way to get that to you. But once again, thanks everybody. Thanks to Deb and Velda and Jason and the whole Wild West Hackin Fest and Black Hills team. Thank you so much. I thought it was a fantastic session. We'll be getting the recording into the Discord channel. If you did provide slides, those will be provided. We're thankful and love the community and love giving back. And so we'll catch those of you that'll be at Wild West Hackin Fest. Look forward to seeing you in person there. So that'll be fantastic. So, all right. Well, with that, we will shut her down and give you guys the rest of the day back. Enjoy it for again those in Florida. Stay safe, thoughts and prayers to all those. So fantastic afternoon, everybody. It was awesome.